Okay, we've talked about Hinduism. Now we're going to talk about Buddhism, the second of the great Indian religions, and also the second most widespread of the Indian religions in terms of number of followers. The most widespread Indian religion geographically. Buddhism is a dominant religion in much of traditional Japanese society, Chinese society, Korean society, Southeastern Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar, and even in insular Southeast Asia. So a very, very important force, historically an important force in Central Asia. There's a period where most of Central Asia is Buddhist before the coming of Islam to those regions. And even the Greeks were affected by Buddhist philosophy and ideas during Alexander the Great's conquest of northwestern India. So profoundly influential. And Buddhism developed, as I stated in the Hinduism video, about how there was a need to kind of jumpstart your transcendence through the caste system and through the ranks of demigods to achieve moksha, right? This kind of escape from the cycle of rebirth and death. Right? That Buddhism was created as an attempt to shortcut this process. There was a man named Gautama Buddha, and according to Buddhist tradition, virtually every sect of Buddhism believes this. He was a great prince in what's now Nepal, which for purposes of our class is part of the Indian subcontinent. He was raised in a Kshatriya caste. His father was a great king. In terms of his prestige, he didn't have a very large kingdom. Nepal was split into petty kingdoms at the time. But he lived in a palace, and he had a great amount of luxury at his disposal. He was raised to be a Hindu of a Kshatriya caste, and his father was an interesting person. His father had been kind of a self-made king. He had been a kind of wandering soldier who fought his way up through battle after battle to the title of king, and he wanted to spare his son from all of the suffering of this world. He wanted his son to live a life free from a lot of the misery that he had experienced, which is a very common, very human desire, right? To make it so that your children don't suffer as badly as you did. So his father sheltered him in the palace, forbade him from leaving, from going into town, from having contact with the outside world. And his father provided his son with everything, the best food, the best teachers. When he got older, he provided him with a harem and provided him with musicians. He lived a life of absolute luxury. Right? It's the equivalent of a billionaire putting their child up in a huge mansion and providing them with absolutely everything. Well, Prince Gautama, became restless as a teenager, and so he managed to sneak out of the palace. And one of the servants followed him and caught up with him and said, "You've got to go back to the palace." And the Buddha, Prince Gautama, not yet the Buddha, but the future Buddha, said, "Well, I want to see more of the world. Follow me." And so the servant followed him around to make sure that he was safe and that he got back safely, because otherwise it would be his head. So as they moved through the surrounding environment, Prince Gautama witnessed the misery of the human condition around him. He saw a beggar who was starving, who was malnourished. And he asked the servant, "Well, what's wrong with this man? He's sitting here holding out this bowl, and he looks like he's about to fall over." And the servant put some money into the man's bowl, and he said, he's starving to death. He has no food. And this affected the Buddha, who had no concept of somebody starving. And then they moved forward, and then they found somebody with leprosy who was also begging. And the Buddha said, "What's wrong with this person here? Why are they so disfigured and so miserable?" And the servant said, "That's a leper. She is sick and will eventually she can't cure herself of this disease." And Prince Gautama had no concept of serious illness. And finally, they came across a funeral, and there was a dead body being carried by mourners. And he saw the dead body being carried, and he said, "What's wrong with this man? Why is he in this state? What's going on with him?" And the servant said, "Well, he's dead. He has died." And he told Prince Gautama what death was, and because knowledge of death had been kept from him. And so, as an adolescent, Prince Gautama was hit hard with a lot of very difficult knowledge all at once. And because it hit him at such a late age all at once, he became obsessed with trying to figure out how to get out of this, right? How to get out of this cycle of rebirth and death so that you would never have to suffer again. That was ultimately his goal, to end all suffering, and not just the suffering of human beings, but of all life forms. He wanted to remove suffering from existence, which is why he's worshipped in so many different countries. And so he went from teacher to teacher. He left his family's palace, ran away. He went from teacher to teacher to teacher to teach him how to escape. How do we make it so that when we die, we do not come back? We enter into union with our Creator and live a life of eternal bliss. Well, some of the teachers that he met were kind of the extreme sadhus. You remember the holy men from the previous lecture, the men who covered them. That was ash that he had covered himself, which is why he had this white coating over his skin. He was covered in ash. And so the idea was that you take on mortification of the flesh, right? You punish your body. You starve yourself. You deny your flesh. And because you deny your flesh, you become detached from this world and more in tune with the spiritual world, with the truth, which is union with the Creator. And Prince Gautama went through all the trials, sleeping on beds of nails, walking on hot coals, punishing his body, putting himself through torment. And he found that it didn't bring him any closer to the truth. He didn't feel any different. He wasn't confident that when he died, he would not return to this world. And so he left the teachers that taught him extreme mortification. And then he went to those who were kind of Gnostic in their point of view. And by Gnostic meaning all about secret knowledge, right? Knowing certain mantras, certain prayers to repeat over and over and over again, that would bring you to salvation. And he kept repeating these formulas, these spells, and repeating them didn't bring him any kind of peace. He still knew that if he were to die at that moment, that he would come back into this world. So he was despondent. He had gone all over India, encountered all kinds of different teachers, and they had not taught him how to escape this world. So he sat down to meditate under what's called the Bodhi tree, which this tree still exists, this very tree. It exists in northern India. And he sat down under the tree and he meditated. And as he meditated, a number of demons attempted to tempt him. They sent beautiful kind of demigoddesses his way to kind of lure him out of meditation. They attempted to hurl arrows at him, and none of it worked. Well, what had happened was that Prince Gautama had been bitten while meditating by these ants. Ants had crawled up his hand and were biting him on the hand and arm, and he moved to wipe away the ants. But at that moment, he was filled with such intense compassion for these lowly ants. He recognized that he was one with the ants. He recognized that all living things are essentially one giant kind of superorganism, right? Spiritually. That there was no real barrier, no real separation between himself and the ants. And because he showed mercy on these ants, he recognized the illusion of existence. He recognized that it's desire that is the source of your suffering. And all the other fundamental beliefs of Buddhism, which we'll talk about in a moment. He had reached the state of enlightenment. And enlightenment doesn't just mean that you're smart, that you have all this knowledge, that you're a master teacher. Enlightenment means one thing, really, more than anything, and that is that if you died at that moment, you would escape the cycle of rebirth and death. So you're enlightened, your spirit will cling to the Creator, and you will not come back into this world when you die. So what were Prince Gautama's, or the Enlightened One, the Buddha's, primary teachings? His first realization was that life is suffering, called dukkha, a word in Sanskrit, the ancient language of North India and Nepal. So life is suffering, and that means that it's your desire to live that is the root of all your pain. Secondly, he realized that all of this is caused by desire or the urge for existence. We keep coming back into this world after every death because we want to. We want to come back. We want to exist in this illusory physical world, which from the Buddhist standpoint was a worthless existence. It was an illusion, kind of a poor copy of the ideal world of God. In order to escape this world and to end suffering, to no longer suffer, we must become desireless. You have to stop. You have to get rid of all desire. Then you will no longer suffer because you'll no longer feel deprived. And desirelessness can only be achieved by the Eightfold Path or right conduct, which is a system of morality that Buddha required his followers to follow. Right? So this religion is based on self-denial. You don't have the kind of ambitions and wants and demands that will keep you tethered to this world. You recognize the world as fake. It's very similar in some respects to ascetic Christianity, right? The monasteries and convents of the early church where people are renouncing the world. The Desert Fathers, all the great hermits of the centuries following the crucifixion, in which they looked at the world, the physical world, as kind of as illusory, not necessarily illusory, but transitory, right? It's the kingdom of God that mattered. You know, if you read St. Augustine's City of God, in that work, he talks about the city of God and the city of man. The city of man, ancient Rome, was doomed to pass away. The city of God, heaven, would last for eternity, right? It would never fade. Well, the Buddha is taking a similar stance. He wants to reject the illusions of this world in exchange for lasting peace, lasting happiness. And you get that by becoming desireless, which you can only do if you follow the correct moral teachings and have compassion for all living things. The Eightfold Path, the 8 rules that every Buddhist has to follow, and this exists largely the same in all of the different sects of Buddhism. Kindness to all living things. Right? So people and animals deserve compassion, deserve kind treatment. It's permissible for people to eat meat. Buddhist monks and nuns generally will not eat meat at all. Many Buddhists will reject eating meat out of principle, but it's not necessarily completely prohibited. Eating meat is kind of like, if you're familiar with the New Testament, You know that St. Paul says that it would be better to never get married, right? But if you're going to uh, fall to lust, it's better that you get married than you sin, right? It's the kind of same situation with eating meat in Buddhism, right? It's better to not eat meat, but if it's the only way that you can keep your strength up, right? It's permissible, but it's not permissible for monks and nuns. Secondly, and regardless of even if you eat meat, you cannot torture or brutalize animals or any living thing. Purity of heart. You have to have good intentions for yourself and for everyone around you. If you harbor ill intentions towards other people, that's going to keep you rooted in desire, and that condition of being rooted in desire is going to keep you coming back to this world. Truthfulness. You have to speak the truth. The character of the Supreme Creator is complete truth. So to become one with that Creator at the end of your life, it's important that you tell the truth. Charity. You have to show kindness for those less fortunate than yourself. Avoidance of hatred and violence. Avoidance of killing. Avoidance of adultery. And do not speak evil. These are the 8 rules that you have to follow in order to become desireless and to break the bond that the hold that this world has on your soul, so that when you die, you become one with God instead of coming back as a human being or a lesser life form. Right? So by practicing these rules, you can become free. Just like with every other major religion on earth, Buddhism has its sects, divisions, and denominations. Right? One of the major sects of Buddhism is Theravada Buddhism. Just like with Christianity, you have Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant, right? With Buddhism, you generally have 2 major divisions. You have Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism is what's popular in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Burma, Cambodia, Laos. It's also popular in Sri Lanka, which is part of the Indian subcontinent. It's that island to the south. And it was popular in the Middle Ages in India, in North India, when Buddhism was prominent in northern India. So many Theravada Buddhists will argue that this is closer to the original teachings of Gautama Buddha. Right? It's very stringent. It's very it requires it's very demanding of the faithful, right? In particular, you have to go to great lengths to become enlightened, to escape the cycle of rebirth and death. One of the ways that is popular to do so is to become a monk or a nun. Monks and nuns are not allowed to. They labor, but they don't make money. So they have to live by begging, and they have to engage in complete renunciation of private property, and they have to be completely chaste and outside of the world. And the way that it works is that these monks and nuns become enlightened. Right? They become enlightened through their stringent spiritual practices. And the idea is that if you are a layperson and you can't become a monk or a nun, you don't have the spiritual fortitude or the circumstances, you give generously to monks and nuns, and then when you're reborn, you will be reborn as someone who can become a monk or a nun. Right? So, for example, you see in Myanmar, Burma, these monks lined up to receive their lunch from this woman who owns a food stand, and she gives to these monks so that she herself, when she is reborn as a monk or a nun. So that's how you achieve salvation. And in early Christianity, there was kind of not necessarily a similar dynamic, but monks and nuns were very, very, very prominent in the economy of salvation in early Christianity, especially. Right? There was this idea um, that the prayers of monks and nuns were necessary for the salvation of humanity because the requirements were so stringent. Right? People really had to put in effort to live righteously, and committing a mortal sin in early Christianity was much more difficult to find forgiveness than what most people believe today. Right? And that's how Theravada Buddhism is. It's very stringent, and it's generally a religion dominated by monks and nuns, with lay people supporting those monks and nuns. The second major division of Buddhism is Mahayana Buddhism. This is the part of Buddhism that is widespread in much of northeastern Asia, Tibet, China, Vietnam and southeastern Asia, Korea, and Japan. This is the form of Buddhism that the belief systems are a bit different from that of Theravada Buddhism, because it's based on something called bodhisattvas, which is a kind of little Buddha, right? A saint, right? They're very similar to saints in Christianity, except the bodhisattvas have more power than saints do, right? Saints are Christians who have gone on ahead of you, who can pray for you, right? And do miracles. Bodhisattvas actually have power over your fate. Bodhisattvas are Buddhas, people who have reached enlightenment, who, when they achieve oneness with the Supreme Creator, they're filled with so much compassion for living things that instead of enjoying an eternity of bliss, and keep in mind they're one with the Creator, so they have the power of creation themselves, right? They have all these supernatural powers. Instead of enjoying eternity with the Creator, they end up creating their own planes of existence, their own little kind of layers of heaven, if you will, where wayward humans and animals who pass away can find respite in their journey, right? The journey towards moksha, right? Which the Buddhists call nirvana. Their word for it is nirvana. So, for example, if you have a bodhisattva, that bodhisattva passes away, and he achieves great. He's enlightened. He will create a way station where, when you die, your soul can go to his little corner of heaven, and there it is much, 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 much easier, 1,000,000 times easier, for you to become desireless, right? For you to achieve moksha, because you're not having to come back into the physical world and deal with the physical world's temptations all over again. You're in this very pleasant place. It's not your final destination. It's not the ultimate bliss, but it's much, much better, much, much easier for you to enter moksha from there than it is to enter it from the earth, to become enlightened. And the way that this bodhisattva is able to pull you to him when you die is through you having faith in him. Right? It's similar to Christianity in the sense that faith can save a person. Right? You have faith in the bodhisattva's power, because in Buddhism you go where ultimately you really want to go. Your soul wants to go when you die. If you really want to go to be with this bodhisattva, you can. And there it's much easier to make it into nirvana, into eternal bliss. Right? So all of the forms of Buddhism that you see in Chinese temples, Japanese temples, Tibetan temples are some type of sect of Mahayana Buddhism. And Mahayana means greater vehicle in Sanskrit. Right? That means greater vehicle in the sense that this form of Buddhism is able to transport more people to nirvana. Right? It's a greater vehicle in that sense. It's much more accessible to the average person. You don't have to be reborn as a monk or a nun. You can go straight to the top. Right? You can go. You stop at the way station, the kind of rest stop, spiritual rest stop, and from there you make it to a blissful existence. Right? And it's much more accessible, much more easy on people. Right? At least that's the presentation. One of the most dominant sects of Mahayana Buddhism is called Pure Land Buddhism. It developed in China, and it became very, very popular in Korea and Japan, particularly in Japan, where it is a dominant form of Buddhism today. Pure Land Buddhism is based on faith in the Bodhisattva Amida Buddha, or Amitabha. So this Amida Buddha, when he died, he created a realm of heaven called the Great Western Paradise after his union with God. And he created a channel so that basically if you pray to him and you sincerely say his name one time, he will be able to pull you into his paradise called the Great Western Paradise after his death. After your death, he will be able to pull you into his paradise, and there he will be able to teach you directly how to achieve enlightenment and become desireless, and thus move on to perfection. And you don't have to do good deeds. You don't have to go through any kind of intent, though you're encouraged to do good deeds. You don't have to do any kind of stringent spiritual asceticism or anything like that. It's just faith alone, faith in Amitabha, right? So, and all you have to do is say his name sincerely one time. So people will repeat his name over and over and over again for hours, right? In the hopes that one of those will be counted as sincere, and then he'll be brought in. That person, when they die, they will be brought into the Great Western Paradise, where they'll be guided into salvation. There is an anime called Angel Beats, if you've ever seen it, where in the story, these teenagers who have died horribly, they either died of diseases or they took their own lives. There's one character who was playing on a baseball team, and he let a grounder go through his legs, and he ended up committing suicide. These teenagers have ended their lives in some kind of tragic way before their time, and so they have all these. They arrive. Their souls arrive in this weird place, it's kind of like a high school, but it's an otherworldly high school, and in reality, they're in this other realm. And the main character is this bodhisattva who's trying to get them to deal with the trauma of their lives so that they can forgive themselves, others, and God. And then once they do that, they disappear, right? They become one with God, and they achieve, from the Buddhist standpoint, they achieve salvation. Right? So it's an interesting anime if you've ever been interested in that kind of thing. I'm not really, but my daughter loved it, so I watched it with her. Okay. The last form of Buddhism we're going to talk about is Zen Buddhism. Now, there are different sects of Zen Buddhism, but the dominant form is the Chan sect that began in China and then spread from China to Japan. And Zen Buddhism is kind of, in Japan certainly, it's kind of a militant form of Buddhism, right? In the sense that it was popular among the samurai class. When we talk about medieval Japan and the Sengoku era later in the semester, we're going to talk a lot about that because it's a fascinating period of time. The samurai were a warrior culture, a warrior caste, and Zen Buddhism promised to teach detachment from pain, from suffering, and it was very, very appealing to people who had to fight for a living. And so Zen teaching was incorporated into their militant lifestyles. So Zen is kind of an anti-rational form of Buddhism. Right? Part of the problem from the Zen point of view was that people were trying to think their way out of existence. Right? They were trying to detach from the world through thought, through rational thought, and that can't be done. So the Zen masters wanted to destroy your reason because they believed that moving past reason was a big part of enlightenment. Now, there were other ways. They didn't claim that their way was the only way, but they believed that by objecting to and defying rationality, you could more quickly achieve nirvana. So the Zen masters would often make their students meditate for hours on end, and they would walk down between them while they were meditating, and they would occasionally pick up their cane and smack the student right on the head with the cane, and it would hurt really badly. And the idea was that by knocking the sense out of them, they would be more likely to reach a kind of sudden burst of enlightenment. And they didn't just do that through administering pain, though that was popular. They also attempted to do it through paradoxes, right? Two hands clap and there is a sound. What is the sound of one hand clapping, right? These are designed to break you from your logic, to stop using logic to try to understand the world. And then when you move past your reason, your mental faculties, then you can achieve oneness with the world around you, and you can become desireless. I keep wanting to say desirelessness. You become desireless, and you can escape to nirvana. And you can see why this would be popular among warriors, because it teaches you to suppress your thoughts. Right? So if you're going into a dangerous situation where your mind can actually be your worst enemy, and you need to act on instinct and training, suppressing your thoughts is very, very, very beneficial. On top of that, it taught resistance to physical pain, detachment from your own suffering. So it enabled these samurai to fight in battles despite taking on grievous wounds. And it was influential all the way into the Second World War, when Japanese soldiers endured tremendous injuries when they were fighting the United States Marines in the Pacific, and Army soldiers in the South Pacific, and also the U.S. Navy. And these Japanese soldiers and sailors were taking on absolutely horrific injuries, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the Second World War. And they were continuing to fight in part because of the training that had been imbued by this sect of Buddhism. But this sect of Buddhism was for the aristocracy, right? The samurai, and later on for people in the military. It wasn't popular among the ordinary population. And that was Pure Land Buddhism that was much more popular. Though the Pure Land Buddhists ended up actually creating their own army to fight the samurai, and the warrior monks of the Pure Land Buddhists, called Ikoiki, were among the most devoted monks, the devoted warriors in world history, because they believed that if they died, they would go straight to the Great Western Paradise of Amitabha, so which we talked about earlier. And of course, people don't realize that there were militant Buddhists. There were Buddhist holy wars, right? So it's not only Christianity and Islam that have the capacity to be militant. Buddhism and many other religions are as well, as is atheism, right? With militant communism being officially atheistic, killing millions of people all throughout the 20th century. So, there's no system of thought or of belief that is free from human nature completely, right? But it's something that many people don't realize. They think of Buddhism and they think entirely of peace and a lot of Western ideas that are actually alien to Buddhist practice in Asia. Okay, we'll stop here, and thank you for listening.